Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, where the topic is Enterprise Resource Capacity Planning. My name is Doug Welsby, and I'm the Channel Manager here at WICRESOFT. I'm also joined by my colleague, Jim Patterson, our Director of Sales. During today's webinar, attendees will be on mute and the line will not be open for questions. However, feel free to use the GoToWebinar question feature to submit questions. I'll address these questions during the webinar and will respond via email if we do not get to your specific question. If for some reason you get distracted or pulled away during the webinar, no need to worry, as I'll be emailing a link to the presentation once it has been posted to our YouTube channel. I'll now turn the presentation over to Jim.
Thank you, Doug, and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today for this topic and enterprise resource capacity planning in an adaptive project management world. Enterprise resource capacity planning is top of mind for a lot of organizations today, and hopefully we can give you some good information today that will help you move the ball forward in your worlds. Some of the topics that we're going to be covering today are some basic resource management concepts and some resource management best practices. We'll talk about resource management reporting and business intelligence, as well as collaboration for winning teams, and then give some demonstration of some summaries and some next steps as we talk about next steps that you can take to maybe move your direction towards the things that we're talking about in this webinar. So what is resource management? Not to get too fundamental and too one-on-one on this, resource management is the efficient and effective deployment and allocation of an organization's resources when and where they are needed. That means basically the right resources on the right things at the right time. It can be a challenge for a lot of organizations, and to get a handle on this and to master this discipline, there are definitely tangible benefits that an organization can achieve through that. One is overall resource visibility. Sometimes this is a fragmented process if it's done at all. Being able to see where people are planned to be or where they're actually working helps an organization make decisions. And sometimes, we're flying blind a little bit on this topic, meaning we're not really sure if we have the capacity or the bandwidth or the wherewithal to deliver on the things that we're committing to. And having that visibility at our fingertips can be helpful in making good decisions and helpful in us making the commitments as well. We can also increase business value, because if we incorporate good resource management practices into the overall project and intake and demand process, we can better ensure that we're selecting to put resources on the highest value things for an organization, meaning we're working on the right things and get more bang for our buck in the utilization and the expenditure of our resources. We can also save time and money, meaning as we get more efficient in the deployment of resources and become more efficient at leveraging those resources, we can save waste on time and money on things like duplication of efforts, or maybe having the wrong resources working on the wrong things when there's more effective resources to do those things, etc., and help us deliver things on a more cost-effective basis. Hence, if we make better commitments based upon more complete information on resources, we can increase our project success rates, meaning if we make better informed commitments, we'll hit those targets more often. Sometimes we miss targets simply because we overcommitted, not knowing if we're stretching the organization to a point where we're likely to not succeed. And we can accommodate demand, meaning as intake comes in across the organization and we contemplate taking on new projects and new efforts or initiatives, we can actually assess where we're already committed and see what we can take on, or to what degree we can take on new things, or what we might want to suspend so that we can take on something of higher priority. And just overall employee satisfaction, if we don't get a handle on the resource management side of this, we have a tendency to overutilize and burn resources to the point where burnout occurs, and ultimately, if it gets so bad enough, it could result in turnover and us having to lose maybe valuable resources in the organization. So resource management challenges that we see out there in the marketplace as we talk to people on this topic on a daily basis is, one, that just the concept of resource ownership. Many organizations that we talk to have a highly matrixed organization, and the ownership of the functional managers who own or are responsible for the resources, I should say, versus the project organizations and the project managers that need those resources to fulfill on their projects, requires some level of let's just say, byplay, negotiation, and allocation so that we can get those right resources when they're needed on the right projects. Another one is resource focus. As I had mentioned, we get demand from all types of places as an organization, but individual resources get assigned resources from a variety of things. They might get assigned strategic projects, discretionary projects, more operational work. And then with all these things on their plate, how do you focus on, or where do you decide what are the highest priority things that you should be working on and where that focus should be? So bringing some clarity to that for the individual resources in your organization is something that's a challenge for many. And as I had alluded to, the non-project workload, the administrative, the non-project, operational type of work, which keep the lights on type of stuff, often takes priority and can sap resources away from the ability to deliver on project work. Being able to have a handle on that and be able to manage that and get good information on that can help us adjust and respond to those situations when they occur. And then resource tracking. Beyond just planning where resources should be and where we think they should be doesn't necessarily mean that's where they are actually working. To be able to track where people are actually spending their time and what efforts are being expended towards delivering on the projects we've committed to helps us decide any adjustments we need to make within those individual projects or how we may have to allocate or reallocate resources to fulfill on the commitments that we've made. We talked about resource visibility. Many organizations don't have that in a connected way. It might be things off on spreadsheets and documents off to the side, or maybe just be gut feel in some organizations on how loaded we are or not. So the resource visibility is a challenge for many, whether it's connected or not connected to the way people are actually executing and delivering on projects. And then the manual reporting. Sometimes to report on resources is a significant manual effort on mashing up data or creating data tables on where resources are, such that staying on top of this requires a lot of manual effort and time that could be better spent on maybe some more high value activities. And ultimately, because resource management is very granular sometimes in its data, a lot of resources, a lot of projects, and sometimes time phased by days, weeks, months, etc. It can turn into an eye chart and be too much information that's not too much data, I would say, that maybe not good decision information format to help us better make those decisions because it's so voluminous. So as we go through and try to get better as organizations and mature through this process, we see basic 5 resource management steps through this stepping stone kind of process. Oftentimes, the easiest way to start is at that higher level of granularity, meaning resource capacity planning. And what I mean by that is it might be general, FTE-based planning. How many heads do I need of a certain type of resource, or maybe a specific resource, but at an initiative level, how many folks do we need? How many do we have? And then look at it at a high level. Are we making commitments based upon the demand really matching that capacity? The next set is really resource allocation, where we might get more granular and really break projects and initiatives down to specific work elements and then assign people to those things and understand who's working specifically on what within those initiatives. That takes a whole nother level of rigor. And some organizations aren't quite ready to do that across the board, across all their areas or functional areas and across all their projects in a very high confidence way. And so that's a next step in the maturity rung, as we see from resource capacity planning. And then overall resource work management, being able to get things down to granular pieces of work and all types of work beyond just project work, maybe incorporating operational work and other things as we factor in an all work focus rather than just on a project-centric focus. And then teamwork management really gets down to team dynamics and getting better as working as teams as we work through and as we get more allocated teams and their dynamics, and so they become more efficient and improve their velocities and how they're delivering as a group. That's a next level of maturity to help us get more efficient in the way we're actually expending resources within the organization. And then personal work management is really taking all those things and the tools that we put into place and having each individual become much more effective in delivering and prioritizing the work that's been put on their plates. If we look at some information from the Gartner Group on the resource management maturity model, if we look at the color coding in here and we look at the areas, that maturity level 2, which is considered a crawl stage in a crawl, walk, run type of continuum, notice that the resource capacity planning is where the bulk of level 2 is in that crawl stage. One is only start projects that can be resourced would be one thing that'd be a good best practice, but we're really talking about defining high-level project roles and staff, prioritizing projects and programs, and really do that high-level capacity planning level of information that we talked about earlier on. It's when you get into level 3 that we start moving more into that detailed resource allocation, moving from FTEs to named individuals, maybe skill sets that they have, and get them confirmed on current resource assignments on those particular tasks within those projects, and maybe even go through a process where you even have a concept of soft booking versus hard commitments of those resources on those projects, all the way through a run stage later on where people are actually getting better and improving those team dynamics that we talked about in that team collaboration and team effectiveness as we move through this maturity model. And then we have to consider resource management maturity dimensions and the things that we want to tackle. If we think about where we're at today, where we aspire to get to, and then maybe some reasonable expectation of where we want to go as our next step, we need to think about these things. Which of these things do we want to tackle, or which we think we're able to tackle? We might start in that top middle on just roles and resources at a high level and really plan capacity based on roles and the resources associated with those roles. We might determine whether or not we want to have a planning tracking level of granularity that's commensurate with our ability to sustain that data as an organization. Are we staying at more of a capacity level? Are we getting down to a task or subtask level of granularity and really getting down to assigning resources at that level of allocation? The resource cost dimension is really, do we want to track resource rates and then look at the resource expenditures that we're making and have those derive resource costs so that we understand what those labor costs are on our projects? Down in the lower right, the whole concept of forecast versus actual. A good place to start for many people is just being able to get a handle on forecasting where we think we're going to allocate resources with those capacity plans, for example, and say this is where we think these resources, what these projects are going to need, where these resources are going to be over time, and then be able to make decisions on taking on new projects based upon what's been committed. The next level of detail would be capturing actuals and maybe capturing timesheets on those things and understanding, even though we forecasted to use resources in a certain way, where are they actually spending their time when it comes time to embark upon those projects? The governance prioritization piece is really tying resource capacity to your overall portfolio management and demand management process, and being able to look at the resource dimension in concert with prioritizing demand as it comes in on your projects, understanding what you can tackle, what are the right things we should be working on, and then allocating your resource demand or resource capacity against that prioritized set of projects. And then beyond that, approval and negotiation, because we are oftentimes in functional matrixed organizations, being able to have an approval and negotiation process between project organizations and functional organizations who are responsible for those resources to make sure we have a common understanding and a streamlined way to get resources staffed onto specific projects. So these are just some areas you need to consider, and just think about where you're really at as an organization and what you can really accomplish as a next step. And Gartner also says that we should balance or reconcile the top-down with the bottom-up. So as we look at resource capacity planning and do more top-down planning from that regard, from a high level, ultimately, people tend to build detailed project plans that they're going to execute with when it comes time to actually work on those projects. At some point, we probably want to at least compare the detailed tactical plans that we built align with what our assumptions were in the resource capacity plan and make adjustments accordingly. So some folks may only be able to handle the top-down capacity planning initially, but some, as they mature, want to do that in the early stages of a project lifecycle, and then look at the bottoms-up resource allocations and what that means, and compare the two, and come to some reconciliation and adjustment based upon the deltas between those. And if we look at the use of roles in a demand and portfolio management environment, as we talked to more about that governance and intake dimension being layered into the resource management process, we have a resource management process down below in the blue where we identify what generic roles we have and what quantity of each role we have is, and identifying the constraining resources and people, the hardest to obtain resources within our organization. And then when we start to time sequence when we do these projects is where it starts to intersect. So up above in the gray where we have an idea and a request process, and we have at some point some go, no-go decisions on whether or not to even pursue the project, maybe a business case process that quantifies some high-level resource capacity planning, and then maybe some proposed collection of projects that's a proposed portfolio that might contain active in-flight projects as well as new projects we're considering. It then intersects with that resource management process to whereby then we have to match that high-level demand of the projects that have been requested or that are in flight to the supply we actually have. And that's where governance teams, steering committees have to look at these things and approve a portfolio that actually accommodates both the resource abilities as well as the other prioritizations that we have, and then approve those projects so that we can then get into more detailed resource allocations into those projects. So if we look at understanding resource capacity, it's really about the top and bottom. We have to have a reconciliation between our capacity, our ability to deliver resources, with our demand, meaning the requests and the demands of the organization for those resources. On the capacity side, we have to answer the questions: how many people do I have that can work on projects? For how much time are they available? And then what roles can they play? Some are more multifunctional or multifaceted. Some are more one-dimensional in the things that they do. And on the demand side, we have to figure out on a project and initiative basis, the resources required for each project, prioritize those projects, and then allocate the resources based on the role and priorities until the resources are exhausted. I mean, exhausted from a numbers perspective, not the resources are tired. But if we reconcile those two things, we are then in alignment of being able to meet our commitments based on our resource constraints. On the left side, we basically want to come up with a process and a discipline where we develop projects based on committed availability from that resource capacity planning process. And then ultimately, we don't want to start projects if resources are unavailable. And if we don't have a handle on this, or we're flying blind or don't have that combined visibility, it's very easy for us to make commitments that we ultimately find out we're not willing or able, I should say, to deliver on. So resource management next steps is we really want to be honest with ourselves as an organization. We want to be able to truly assess our readiness to tackle what level of maturity in that. And the graphic on the side really says it's okay to take baby steps in this. Understand your resource management maturity, understand the environment that you're in, the culture that you have, and factor that into your plans. And based on that, build a resource management roadmap of where you want to get to, but then develop a practical action plan to get to whatever that next maturity level step is that you've identified. And also define your process first and then automate it in a solution like we're going to talk about here today. Oftentimes people try to automate something or a process that doesn't yet exist, so it's like trying to automate vapor if you really boil it down to that. So make sure you have a process in mind as you put it into a solution. So how do organizations manage resources today? Well, unfortunately, typically folks are resorting to Excel. They do it because it's freely available. We all basically know how to use it to some degree. And sometimes they're either unaware or don't have access to alternatives. So innovation breeds, necessity breeds innovation. And they do things like we see over here on the right-hand side. But it's definitely not ideal, especially when it's standalone from just a resource plan by itself. The problems with Excel is that it lacks standards. It's very individual. It's a very manual and static model. So even when you build a time phase set of columns, every time something has a change in time frame, it's got a ripple effect that has to be changed cell by cell, project by project. And it's very time consuming to maintain. By the time you're done, it's often changed to where it's also often out of date by the time you're finished. As we all know in Excel, it's easy to break formulas and calculations, meaning the data may not be reliable. And there's no dynamic visibility of your resource capacity as you add people into the organization. So it can be very time consuming. It can be disconnected from your general project management execution information. And it's not necessarily good for providing visibility insight to overall reporting in your whole project or PPM world. So those are some of the limitations we have with that. And we have transformative options in this digital transformation age that allow us to do it differently. And some of those things would be to have your process embedded into your solutions so that they're not fragmented like a spreadsheet over here for this purpose and a document over here for this purpose. We have the ability to now have central database storage for these types of repositories of information and have it generate and be available for actionable intelligence and business intelligence and reporting so that we can make decisions based upon good information without having to manually cobble that together. What we're going to talk about today is OnePlan and how it can actually connect strategy to execution. It does a lot of different things from a portfolio, financial, and resource planning perspective. We're going to focus on the resource planning component of that mostly today and a little bit on how it dovetails with that portfolio planning that we talked about earlier on. Also, everything we talk about today is basically fused into a Microsoft user experience because it's built on Office 365 and the Microsoft Power Platform. So if you're a Microsoft shop, these capabilities you're going to see today can be surfaced in conjunction with Office 365, SharePoint, or Teams. Can be in your dev environment in Azure DevOps or in Dynamics 365 or the Power Platform, or even within your existing use of Project Online to extend its capabilities. So there's a lot of flexibility on how we will use this within the Microsoft Cloud. And what Doug's going to show you today, and I won't steal his thunder, is give you the idea of how we can do visual resource capacity planning within individual projects themselves, how we can then view that resource capacity organization-wide across all resources and all projects, how we can leverage that resource information in the context of portfolio analysis, so as we prioritize projects, being able to look at what our resource capacity is in demand and does it exceed or do we have underutilized resources in certain areas within that context as we're selecting projects to work on. And then even how that can be leveraged from financial planning, how we can derive financial information on labor costs based upon that information. And then ultimately, dynamic reporting and analysis through reporting that's available that becomes a natural output of just working the process and the solution without you having to cobble it together each and every reporting period. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Doug and make him the presenter so that he can demonstrate these capabilities to you and show it to you in action and how these things are here today. Take it away, Doug.
Great, thanks for that, Jim. As Jim has said, resource management is a complex but a critically important area of focus for every organization. So today, while I walk you through the OnePlan portfolio and resource planning capabilities, I'll be showing you reporting capabilities that we have within the solution. We'll be looking at portfolio plans and how work which spans multiple tools and methodologies can be consolidated within OnePlan. We'll look at our OnePlan enterprise resource planning capability, enabling you to do enterprise-wide and organizational-wide capacity planning. We'll also examine our OnePlan negotiations feature, an optional feature if your organization works with resource managers for centralized resource management. And then finally, to wrap up, we'll look at our OnePlan portfolio what-if scenarios when you're considering resource capacity and demand on those resources and whether or not you have sufficient capacity to deliver on all of the work across your organization. So the first area I'll focus in on is reporting within the solution. Our OnePlan toolset is fully integrated with Microsoft's Power BI solution for OData reporting, so that as you deploy a portfolio of projects, programs, or portfolios, you have a full dashboard for reporting on this solution. If we focus on resources and I switch to our resource dashboard, we'll see in this area that we have a list of the available resources and their categorization within the solution. We're showing over time the resource load and the availability for those. And if I was to drill into and look at, for example, this developer role, we see that we have negative availability, effectively having demand outweigh the capacity or availability for those developers, just because of too much demand for a developer type resource within our individual resource plans. Those resource plans that I'll walk you through in a few moments when we look at the OnePlan resource planning capability provide for visibility into how your project managers are estimating resource requirements. We see here a list of proposed projects, when those projects are being deployed or proposed, the timeline for those, and then we see the types of resources that are being proposed for use within those and the overall estimated work requirements or demand on those resources over time for the different projects and plans that are in this tool. Finally, our resource planning versus capacity chart shows you where we have some trouble areas. And we see over time that for the most part, our business analysts, developers, and project managers, the demand does not outweigh the capacity, but we do have some problem areas starting to crop up in April and May, where we're seeing yellow and red highlighting, indicating that there's a little too much demand on those particular types of resources, and a portfolio or a resource manager would need to do something about this. Switching away from the reporting interface and showing our OnePlan portfolio plans, you'll see that even without Power BI, we do have a rich and comprehensive reporting interface built directly into OnePlan. Within this tool, we're seeing a wide variety of plans and high-level information about them. And of course, we have the capability to drill down into the details and examine those plans a little closer, a little deeper. But within this interface, we have list views, board views, and roadmap views. And we've covered OnePlan in a number of other webinars, so I won't dig too deep into the functionality within this solution. But again, we provide an interface for reporting, showing list views, boards, roadmaps, and a variety of different fashions through which you can visualize and examine the details of your portfolio and the proposed plans within them. So within this view, we're seeing a wide variety of plans organized and grouped, in this case, by the portfolio with which they're associated. I can change this grouping. I can sort in this view. I can filter out specific projects. So for example, if I wished, I could change this state view and filter and show only proposed projects. So if you're working through a workflow where you've got new demand, newly proposed projects that are coming into the tool, and you're considering whether or not you have sufficient resources, along with potentially sufficient budget, and trying to do prioritization on these plans, we can achieve that with the OnePlan portfolio prioritization capabilities. If I layer back in all of the projects, including in-flight and proposed projects, at this point, I can also do prioritization through this tool by changing to a prioritization view, mixing in both active and proposed projects, and showing metrics across this view about the impact of those particular plans on different key strategic drivers for the organization. So for example, if you want to examine the strategic alignment of these plans, whether or not they lower cost, or what the risk of them is, we can assess a prioritization score. Now, this is typically used as an initial step in prioritization to help you organize the view of your plans, which ones are the highest priority, which ones are returning the most benefit per the estimated cost for those plans. But of course, the next questions that always get asked are, how much is this going to cost? And how many people is this going to take? What's the impact on our resources? And can we deliver on them? Do we have sufficient resources and availability to deliver on these proposed projects mixed in with our active projects? So let's take a look at that and examine the details of a resource plan for one of those existing projects or those proposed plans. So this support customers using mobile plan I'm going to switch through to this plan, and I'll show that now we have the focus on the details of this individual plan. We're looking at high-level information in this view, showing general information, some financial information, other details that we can expose in these detailed views, very configurable and easy to organize and sort the information in a manner that makes the most sense to your organization. If I switch to the resource plan for this particular plan, now we're looking at what the portfolio and project manager has provided as an estimate for the resource requirements for the support customers using mobile plan. So we see here that we've mixed in a variety of human and generic resources into the plan, Daniel Williams, project manager, etc. We provided a high-level timeline for this plan, in this case, looking at this current calendar year, January through December. And then we've keyed in some high-level requirements for these resources in terms of hours per month that are required. Now, this resource planning interface is very flexible. I can change the date range, for example, if you want to plan maybe as an initial step at a quarterly period or a yearly period. Maybe you want to look at the next 5 years for long-running plans and provide some really high-level estimates as to the resource requirements and what you think you'll use for these plans. We don't have to plan in hours. If you wish, you can use percent or FTE, and as we convert and switch between those different measures, the numbers are recalculated for you, showing the correct assessment of percentage or FTE values per the hours that we've input. And then finally, we can also plan, as I indicated earlier, with generic or human resources mixed into the same plan. You may be working with a model where, as a project manager, you have some specific individuals that you know you can allocate, Daniel or Grace, because perhaps they work in your team. But you may need to reach out to an enterprise resource manager to help you find a developer or another type of resource if none exist on your team. And perhaps you're working with a centralized resource management role for someone to find you those resources and allocate a human being to replace a generic resource in these plans. So within this view, as I think through what I think I'm going to need for resources for this plan, I've added Daniel, I've added a project manager, maybe I need to add another resource. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, I need to find myself a business analyst. And if I know that a business analyst exists as a generic resource, I just start typing that name in and can add that business analyst to this team. I have other ways of finding that resource, including searching by role or searching by name or within specific departments, other attributes that you might be capturing for those types of resources to enable searching and finding either generics or human resources to add to your proposed resource plan. In this case, I think I'm going to need that business analyst for 50 hours per month through June, July, and August. So it's as simple and very similar to using a spreadsheet for adding that resource and entering the anticipated resource load over time between June through to August. I think I'm going to need that person for roughly 50 hours per month as I do this high-level plan. Now, we have other ways of adding those resources and allocating the demand on that resource over time, including, let's say we want to just simply do an allocation of that existing resource that's been added already. I might then go in and say, I'm going to allocate the requirement for that person from perhaps June of 2020 through to October of 2020. And I think I'm going to need them for approximately 50 hours a month. So I'm changing that initial requirement, adding additional workload in, allocating over time. So great functionality to either key it in manually, allocate resource demand over time, essentially with one click of a button to have multiple periods of resource demand. And of course, what you can't do very easily in an Excel interface, but you can do here, is drag and drop. So if I want to rekey or re-enter that time and just move it from a start of June to a start of May, I've just dragged that demand for that particular resource over in time. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you may be working with resource managers within the organization, or perhaps you have the ability to assign human resources to your plans automatically yourself. As a project manager, you can reach out and find someone. So within this individual resource plan for this individual project plan, I can layer in my resource view. I can say that I want to find resources. I can search by name. I can look for generics by business unit or role or any other attribute that I've allowed or that the system has configured for categorization of those resources. And if I want to find my business analysts, now I'm looking at a team of resources that have been identified as business analysts within this system. And as I look down this list, I see that Adam Barr is a likely candidate. He has good availability, remaining work hours throughout the period during which I need a business analyst from May through to September. So I could very easily select Adam and replace him on my team, substituting for that business analyst. Now, as it turns out, we are working in this example, this demo walkthrough with resource managers. And instead, what I've done is I've proposed this business analyst in my plan. And this is going to act as a highlight to a resource manager who wants to provide me with an actual human being to replace that generic role and then confirm that this person has been committed to my plan. So I won't replace a business analyst with Adam. I'm going to leave that as a proposal. And I'm going to flip now over into the scenario where I'm a resource manager working with a selection of resources and responsible for staffing these plans. So as I switch to the resource planning interface, you'll see here that I have a wide variety of resources. It could be that I'm a resource manager for a specific team or collection of teams, or maybe I'm a resource manager for a division or responsible for only specific types of resources. Maybe I manage all of the business analysts, or maybe I have a mix of roles within this organization. And if I add that identifier here to see the roles, I can show very quickly that I have access to business analysts, developers, project managers, etc. So essentially, I'm managing a team of people. But if I wanted to filter this view and only look at the business analysts in this team, perhaps that's my focus today, or this is the area where I'm responsible for, I can very quickly see what's going on within this selection of people. And as I open up that business analyst role, I see the support customers using mobile plan. I see that there is a proposal to use that generic business analyst in that plan. And as I look on the right-hand side of this grid from May through to September, that's the requirement for that particular business analyst role that's been identified, where we require a human resource to take place of that generic resource. So now as a resource manager, I can perform a function very similar to what the project manager was doing. I find resources. In this case, I've filtered on my business analysts. I can take Adam Barr. If I wish, I can open Adam up and see that he's working on some other plans. In this case, just the VoIP phones project with some allocation over time, including 50 hours in May. That happens to overlap with the 50 hours in May that I need for this support customers using mobile plan, but no problem. He'll have sufficient capacity because we see that there's remaining capacity of 118 hours for Adam. So let me pick Adam. Let me pick that support customers using mobile plan and replace the resource on that plan with Adam. Now, if I refer to the top part of the screen, I can now see Adam Barr's allocation. There's that VoIP phones plan. There's the support customers using mobile plan. And he's got a little overlap there, but we're still green. He's got capacity of 168 hours for that month, only 100 hours of allocation. So there's no overage for that particular resource yet. And then the final thing I can do as a resource manager is I can indicate to the project manager that I fulfilled that requirement, and I can switch this from proposed through to committed, so that now we see that that particular resource has been assigned, been committed to that plan, and as a project manager for that particular resource, he'll know that he can use Atom and go ahead and start scheduling work within a work plan. So if I switch back to my plan, I'm going to resort back and look at that support customers using mobile project that we focused on earlier. Within my resource plan view, we'll see that Atom's in there now with a commitment that he's been allocated to my plan, 50 hours a month, May through September. He's all green across the board, and that resource manager has done his job or her job to allocate me a resource to replace that business analyst. Now, the final part as a project manager, before I start thinking about the portfolio again, is that this project manager's not only considering the details of the plan, the resource requirements, but probably also concerned about cost. So if I switch to the financial plan for this particular project, we'll see in this view, again, very much like a spreadsheet, that we have associated a variety of different cost categories for cost category capture, materials and supplies, travel and expenses, software contracts, etc. But we're also able to roll up a blended rate for all of the labor requirements coming from that resource plan. So as we make a resource plan estimate, including requirements for the particular resources over time, we now start to visualize what those resource labor costs may be within a financial plan for this particular proposal, support customers using mobile. We now know what the total labor costs are, together with a number of other potential costs, all categorized and controlled by the project management office within this type of interface. So let me flip back now to the portfolio planning view. We've gone through and done a prioritization within these plans. On the details page, we've identified what their strategic alignment is, what the risk is, etc. And we have a weighted prioritization score. So in this case, we see that the highest priority plan is this VoIP phones plan, followed by a number of other plans down this list, all based on these easily configurable metrics and this variable weighting prioritization score. I could also layer in a sort here by, for example, benefits for those plans. We see very quickly that we have some high priority, high return on investment or benefit type plans that have floated to the top. So we've got a fairly good idea here within the prioritization capability of the tool, which of these plans make the most sense for the organization. But let's focus back on resources and layer into this view the resource planning capability of OnePlan. So remembering that we've built out a resource estimate for all of that proposed work, including that support customers using mobile plan that we developed earlier, we now see within this view in the lower half of the screen that we've got some periods where we've some over allocations for different resources. So for example, if I was to look at this resource, Erwin, we'll see here he's red in the months of March and May because of over allocation across several different projects, including in the month of March, for example, this improved user experience plan. I can look at Amy, for example, if I'm managing her as well, and I can see that we have similar overages from March through May, again, because of that improved user experience project. So in the upper half of the screen, I see that that particular plan is proposed. It has a very low prioritization score. So if I'm working within the PMO and examining demand on my resources, newly proposed plans such as this improved user experience plan, and examining the prioritization of them together with benefits, cost, other metrics that we might use for very quickly separating the high value plans from the low value, all I need to do is go through a portfolio prioritization exercise and just remove that improve user experience from that portfolio, we see Amy and Erwin are no longer assigned to that plan. We've taken it out of their projected resource demand. We've turned Amy green across the board. She's now focused on several other plans, but improve user experiences out of her potential workload. She's green. Erwin, on the other hand, we've still got a little bit of an issue in the month of May because of some over allocation here, but you'll see very quickly that we've gotten him green again by being able to remove that one plan, as simple as that. Now, there's other ways of tackling this, including rescheduling within these plans. We can also examine some of the financial metrics of the plans, estimated budget, and line that up against our available funding for the proposals. And we've covered off several of those other prioritization capabilities within other webinars. So I'd encourage you to search our archive of OnePlan webinars in examining other ways of doing portfolio prioritization. So today I've taken you through some of the high-level steps for doing OnePlan resource planning, for examining capacity and demand across your enterprise resource pool using our OnePlan prioritization capabilities. So I'll now turn things back over to Jim to wrap up the webinar. Jim, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you, Doug. Let me start presenting my screen again. And let's summarize and wrap up today what we've learned. Just from a summarization of the topics we've covered, resource management is a critical success factor for overall PPM success within an organization, and that your approaches and processes should align with your organizational readiness and maturity when you tackle them. High-level capacity planning, like Doug was showing here today, is a good place to start, but more detailed resource allocation can follow as you are ready for it or as it is needed within the process and within your organization's goals. OnePlan does provide a great platform for all PPM capabilities, portfolio and resource and financial alike, but OnePlan can also extend existing solutions to provide enhanced visual planning and capabilities in the areas that Doug was showing today. OnePlan really also brings to the party all aspects of top-down and strategic planning and analysis. So regardless of what tools or platforms you're working in today, that can be brought in as part of that overall user experience and set of capabilities. And then OnePlan, once again, is fully integrated and embedded in the Microsoft Cloud. So whether you want to use this within Teams, within SharePoint, within Project Online, within Azure DevOps, etc., within the Power Platform of Dynamics, all those options are available. So regardless of where you're sitting today in the Microsoft Cloud, this is a viable option for you. Just a little bit about WICRESOFT. We are a multi-gold certified partner with a specific focus in the areas of project and portfolio management. We were established as a joint venture with Microsoft in 2002. So we are business partners as well as technology partners, and we were honored to be named their 2019 Worldwide PPM Partner of the Year. We do have a worldwide footprint and strategic partnerships where we don't have locations, so we can support you wherever you're at. And we can support you to whatever degree you'd like. We are a full service consulting and advisory services firm. So if you want implementation support on solutions like this, or education and training to help you adopt, or ongoing success, customer success and support beyond that, or even advisory services to help you put some of these best practices in place and help you roadmap a course. We do that for customers as they want. So to the degree that you would like some help, we can provide it for you. As a special offer today, if you'd like to see how you could get into these types of solutions and adopt the things that you've seen here today, we're offering you a free PPM roadmap workshop, a mini assessment, if you like, to review of your current use of PPM tools or the tools you are using, assess your current requirements and your desired future state, and determine how to implement or migrate to a new adaptive PPM solution that includes the capabilities that we saw here today. And then provide you an implementation roadmap for the best adoption and success and what that might cost in order to make that happen. We do offer a OnePlan trial for adaptive project portfolio management up on AppSource in Microsoft at appsource.com. So you can download it and start working with it on a limited time basis to try out the capabilities hands-on. We're also happy to work with you and chaperone you through that process if you like. So from a next steps perspective, if you want the free PPM roadmap workshop, we can talk to you about doing that. If you're really looking seriously at a tool and want a chaperone trial by WICRESOFT, we can happily support you with that. Or if today's demo was a little more generalized, or maybe not deep enough to what the things that you wanted to talk about in your use cases, we're happy to schedule and arrange a personalized one-on-one demo for your organization. Webinar will be sent out to you in recording and the slides afterwards, and it'll be up in our on-demand area at uswicresoft.com/webinars. And then any upcoming webinars we have will be listed up there as well, so you can register for them as they come up. We do these webinars all the time. Please reach out to us if we can be of assistance at contact@wicresoft.com. If you have a specific question you'd like to address to me, you can reach me at jpatterson@wicresoft.com. Otherwise, we really hope to engage with you on some level and hope you found value today in the topics that were presented. And have a great day. Thanks for your time.